Welcome back to the Backside Poddy. This week we're joined by Ben from Caden Carbon Wheels, a man who is at the forefront of wheel manufacturing, not only just in Australia but worldwide. We're going to discuss all things wheel tech, testing procedures and manufacturing, as well as the main reason for his visit to Brisbane, where he has just come from the Emirs Velodrome conducting track wheel testing for Cycling Australia in conjunction with the QAS.
2 gin and tonics, 2 vodkas, and a scotch.
Yes?
500 watts, please.
This week we have a slightly different backside crew for this special episode. He's a previous guest of ours and an absolute fan favourite. He's a bike tech geek and an all-round legend. Welcome, Irish Johnny. Thank you for joining me, and I feel like you're the perfect man for this chat tonight with Ben.
Oh, thanks. It was so good. So happy to be back. I think after my last few ditherings on the podcast, I thought I'd be banned, but yet here I am. Yes, I got a call saying that we were going to have a very, very special guest today. And with the background and what we're going to be talking about and everything that I love around bike check, I was like, I couldn't say no. Literally couldn't say no, to the thing that my little boy Finn is over here in the corner. Maybe the youngest backsider that we've had thus far.
Yep.
Who's here while his mum goes out with Free Brincini's wife for a well-deserved dinner. I think they're going to be putting some stuff in the shopping cart tonight.
Are they really? Some handbags maybe.
Maybe.
Anyway, tonight we're joined by Ben from Caden Carbon Wheels. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks for having us on.
It's a pleasure of you to join us, and nice for you to
I've only been up since 4 a.m. this morning, but I promise to behave.
when are you flying home, mate?
10 tonight.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've got to get home. I've got 2 little 20s. I've got 2 boys, so back for them and do some stuff over the weekend. But I've had a pretty epic day up at Emirs today. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, how did that all go?
Yeah, awesome. Got to meet Corey Boddington.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
he's an Olympic gold medalist.
Yep.
Absolute legend. I looked him up before I came up. I knew he'd be doing the testing because he holds a very consistent position for the aero sensor. So we don't get much variation and get a consistent read on the results. Anyway, he'd only been cycling for 18 months before he won the gold medal.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unreal.
I know. It blew me away. And so he literally almost can't use his right arm. He got hit by a car really badly and blew the nerve up in his arm and managed to make a bit of a comeback from there. And then he was motocross racing and just blew himself to pieces, same shoulder. Must have killed a leprechaun on that shoulder, Johnny, or your cousin or something. I'm not sure.
I tell you what, he's got all the bad luck with that shoulder.
But now his arm is really bad. But it's a funny thing because his arm can sit in an aero position really well, but it can't support anything. So he still can sit there in an aero position and hold it in place and lock it in. And obviously, to win the kilo race like he did in Paris and get the gold, it worked.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Geez, he must have some core strength, eh?
Yeah,
Like,
if
his arm can't really support his weight in a TT position or
when you look
like
at his right arm has less than half the size of his right shoulder, should I say?
Yep.
Has about less than half the size, so there's not much there. But his legs make up for it.
Yeah, they always do as cyclists, funny enough.
Gosh, we'll have to get some core strength tips off him. Like, jeepers, I can barely sit myself up in the morning, let alone hold myself up on a bike without one arm. That's impressive.
Absolutely. So what sort of stuff were you testing at the velodrome today?
We were trying to do the double Ds, but didn't have the D cup in place for the front, which is a bit of a bugger. So
love the double Ds.
I know we all do. But the rears, because I was supposed to do the test with Curbs in about 2 weeks' time. He had to go to Europe with ARA.
Yep.
And luckily David Betts, who's a legend in the sport, obviously as well, and he's works with Curbs very closely. Said he could do it, and he came in from his holidays to do a day because they need some new wheels. They've blown up a few rear wheels recently, a couple of other brands, and they need some replacements. So the rear was the main test, the rear disc, and front tri-spokes. So I bought 2 front tri-spokes, and they had obviously multiple tri-spokes that we got a baseline against, and then tested that. My front is very similar to the Campagnolo shape anyway.
Yep.
So as long as we tested the rear well, which it did, then the front will be okay. And we'll obviously do that later on anyway,
Yep.
probably at South Australian Tunnel and do it down there.
It's a good advantage having a wind tunnel on home turf as well. Hey.
Yeah, Corey did his skin suit and other things down there and dialed a lot of things in that obviously worked well in Paris for him.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very lucky. And some of the operators down there have, worked with multiple World Tour teams, and having that bank of knowledge leapfrogs you a lot because you can make some mistakes, believe me. So
yeah, and we were chatting last week, and you mentioned that you're going to Silverstone potentially.
Yeah, going to go end of May,
Yep.
early June, just trying to lock in a date. I've got a professor from a university over there that's
Yep.
going to come along and sort of mediate it because, inviting a wheel manufacturer to a wind tunnel is like bringing Dracula to the blood bank. Everyone's a winner, but how does everyone beating everyone else? So someone's
So true.
running maybe a few little extra massaging of data. And I really want to have a very open, transparent test. It'll be a live test, all on video. So effectively, I'll be the monkey just changing all the wheels out and the tyres out. And then we'll have the operator, them mediating effectively the test. So they can, show the data live on video and show the wheel live so we know exactly what's there. And then I'm going to, hopefully I've been looking to get a pair of scopes. I don't want to buy a pair of $7,000 wheels, but they're obviously, running really well on the recent tests. And I want to run my 60s against the 60 scope with multiple tyre sizes, 23,
Yep.
25, 28, 30, 32. And I think that'd be interesting for people to see and also run down why and how we would potentially improve. So the scope, not many people know, have a hidden nipple and a low spoke count, which is one of the main reasons why they're beating the other wheels. Everyone looks at the rim profile and that cool shark effect they have on it, but they don't take into account the functionality of the egg beater, which is spokes flying around at 5 times the speed the wheel's going. So I'll run my wheel with a full spoke count, then a lower spoke count, both with external nipples, and then the lower spoke count with hidden nipples. And I'll show the difference of each setup and how hopefully we get to or beat that wheel. So the transparency should provide some interest. People like you, Johnny.
I mean, like, my eyes are growing wider and wider. We probably should have this on video as I go through, like, the ruminations in my mind of what this is going to look like. I mean, without diving too much into the details, so are you going to construct 3 different rims in order to do the high spoke count, low spoke count?
Yes.
And then with the hidden nipples? Because that does sound, I mean, like, obviously hidden nipples is something that could sound great, but certainly from a wheel profile and how that works, is that going to change the structural layup of the wheel and the weights of the wheel? And when we think about it as a whole system, are we going to see that, or is this just going to be a pure aero test?
That would be more like a real life test like we did today. So, an aero sensor testing, for example, where weight would come into it. Whereas an aero test, you're spinning the wheel, yes, but it's not measuring the rolling resistance or the weight of the wheel. It's pure aero. So we're going to, I'm going to make 3 different wheels, or actually 4. The 4th wheel, this will be probably a big fail, but it may not be. I'm going to drill about 100 holes through a wheel, like a wiffle ball that has all the holes through it. So the 4th wheel will be the same low spoke count, 16 spoke hidden nipple setup, similar to the scope front wheel, because all the main aero happens in the front, by the way. The rear wheel probably does 30% of it, if that. So the front's the main focus. We will test both, blah, blah, blah. But the wiffle ball will be, I think, visually an obvious and interesting test. Whether it hopefully provides some unintended consequence, I don't know. But what would your thoughts of drilling 100 holes in a wheel be for a tunnel?
Well, I would imagine the turbulent flow that you're going to create from all these multiple negative pockets within the hole in the wheel and then spinning around on something, I'm imagining it's going to look a little bit, said earlier on, like what meringue looks like when you egg blender it. So I'm just wondering, when you're doing the airflow around it, if you're going to be able to color the air so that people can actually see just that extraordinarily turbulent effect. I know that when we were talking about aero wheels a couple of episodes ago, and again, I was talking the same thing around how the front wheel is so important, and particularly in different yaw angles, because, you know, the whole point of aerodynamics is actually drag reduction, not so much cutting through the air. It's reducing that ability to be impacted by negative pressure. I think if you could show that when you have holes that sucks in air, creates these little turbulent eddy flows, and if you could maybe color the air, I think people are going to get a real understanding of, that's what they mean. So when we're chasing watts, we're actually chasing drag reduction.
We could get Joe Rogan with his cigar just to blow in the wheel for us. I'm sure he'd come over and do
Man,
that.
that'd be an interesting podcast.
Wouldn't it?
But yeah, to what you said there, that the front wheel is definitely the critical factor in results. And yeah, I hope it works. I don't expect it to, but even if I got an idea from it, it could be an interesting test. Visually, it'll be a bit of fun anyway.
Yeah. Maybe the key's 50 holes instead of 100 holes. Who knows?
I know the holes will go through a process of 1 millimeter hole up to 2 millimeter and then 3 millimeter. So I will do until I get hopefully enough of a read on the result to provide 1 to 3 or 4 watts difference, and then I'll give up.
Wow. Well, it'll be a very interesting test. And with this testing, is there like a baseline tyre that you'll use? Like
most people do a baseline 28.
Yep.
I'm obviously going to do that, but I'm going to do 4. I'm going to do 25, 28, 30, 32.
Yep.
Across the same wheels.
Yep.
This isn't going to be like a 10-wheel test like the epic one that not Bike Radar, what are they called? The recent one.
Oh my gosh, my head's going to Bike Radar as well.
Yeah,
but I
know
know
the Bike magazine in the UK. The other one was the Ruler test that was done last year.
Not Cycling News?
Bike News. Anyway, the big test that was done recently for 10 different sets of wheels at Silverstone. That's the one with the scope wheel one. But yeah, I'll be doing multiple tyres because obviously we run different tyres, and the key thing is tyre rim interface.
Yep.
For the rim side of it. So then you go, hey, you know, I'm up to 34 mil wide. Is that wide enough? So I'll have another wheel as well that's 37 mil wide to see if that provides a benefit with, you know, to what tyre should I say? Up to a 30, is that where the sweet spot is? Or is the sweet spot 32 or 25? So for time trial, for example, it's obviously narrower. And then as we, you know, move on, it seems to be wider and wider.
Well, the issue I've got with my bike is I can only fit a 30 on the rear, and like it'd be a bit weird to have like a 34 on the front, wouldn't it? Like it'd be a weird concept to have a wide front tire and a skinnier rear.
It's actually a way of cheating in an aerodynamic test.
Is it?
You know, yeah. So I've never agreed with it because I'm a big believer of your weights on the rear and you want the handling, and there's such little benefit to run a narrower rear than front. But a lot of companies did that for a while. Still big companies are doing it. And if you pull in the internal width of the rear narrower than the front, yes, you'll get a tiny aerodynamic advantage in a tunnel, but real world rolling resistance will not be as good. The wider the internal, the better the rolling resistance. I think that's a pretty well proven fact now. So I'm not running narrower rear internals.
Yep.
Yes, some frames won't handle it. That's a different conversation.
Yep.
But for pure performance, running narrow wheels on the rear, is not really going to. It'll help you a bee's dip, but you'll lose it in rolling resistance, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more to wheel building than I thought. And with that, like, are you an engineer or anything like that?
No. My background's failing in hydrodynamics, which is the best area to fail in because it's supremely obvious that your results have yielded a negative return effectively. So I learned at a very young age building wakeboards, windsurfers, boats. I luckily lived next to the 18-foot skiff world champion, John Winning, for about probably 10 years.
That's a good name, John Winning.
What a name.
I know. And his son has a blimp, for God's sake. That family was winning all the time.
I wonder is his son's name Max Winning.
No, it's actually Herman.
Winning. Now
I
that's
haven't
the,
Feels
winning.
like he's Mr.
And they're
Tricky.
a
Yeah,
lovely
that's
family. I'm
disappointing.
like, oh, you guys have just stopped winning. You know, he taught me about aspect ratios on foils and, you know, all different breeds of things, because in hydrodynamics, you need to keep a thinner aspect ratio. Or it's not, you shouldn't say aspect ratio, because that's about the length of a wing versus, it's the chord versus the thickness of the foil. And a foil in water, when you get it wrong, it'll tell you straight away. You know, it won't point upwind, it'll cavitate, you'll have bubbles behind it. You'll spin out on a windsurfer. So I learnt very quickly about what's obviously right and wrong. And there's very good correlation to that with wheels. Like I knew for years and years that tyres were too fat compared to the rim. So I kept going wider and wider and wider. And that's why we've seen that, you know, trend today, because now with a lot more transparency in testing, it's becoming obvious in air like it has been in water for a long time.
what was the transition into wheels then?
In France in 97, we were talking about that earlier with your ski seasons, Johnny.
Yeah.
I was having a great time frolicking around the world skiing and enjoying myself, and luckily got a job in the southwest of France at a really nice bike shop. And because I couldn't speak very good French yet, I got stuck in the back wheel building.
Yep. Just
and
putting
I saw-
spokes in wheels and putting the hubs in and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, they just had me building Mavics, Open Pros back then, because Mavic was the wheel in France.
Yep.
And, you know, they had a lot of clients that lived near the Pyrenees, so they were good riders, and we'd be building up wheels for the clients, etc. So he taught me, they called it triplet lacing, which is 2-to-1 ratio these days, which is why brands like Campagnolo and Fulcrum feel so nice as a wheel, because they're triplet laced. And a lot of people don't know that if you get a 1-to-1 ratio wheel, it'll feel sloppy in the rear end, because the non-drive bracing angle has so much more good angle than the drive side, and it wants to pull it to the left every time you pedal. Well, I used to get brake rub in your rim brake bike all the time, whereas, you know, Fulcrum and Campy, etc., don't get that as much. And now Shimano have moved to 2-to-1 ratio, Roval 2-to-1 ratio. I've been building it for 15 odd years or more. And yeah, so all those sort of little things came into place in France. But then I did triathlon, and because of triathlon, you don't have much money because you've got to do so much training. And I realised I didn't want to buy a $3,000 set of zips,
Yes.
and I ended up just building my own wheels.
Oh,
and
wow.
that was an organic process to all my friends saying, well, can you just build me a set of wheels?
Yep.
And, you know, that through the sort of mid, 2000s, 2005, 2010, then organically grew into Caden from sort of 2010 onwards.
Now that is something I would never think of doing, is building myself a set of wheels. Did you manufacture the rim back?
No. Back then I was buying
You were buying
rims.
a rim and
I was
just,
buying
and then
rims.
just lacing them
Yeah.
all up. Yep.
We're doing. I was starting to move towards carbon, but a lot of aluminium rims
Yeah.
early in the day, and then there was the hybrid aluminium carbon rims, and then the general progression forward to full carbon. A lot of tubulars.
Yes.
So a lot of sniffing glue, and
Yep.
I've been playing all day with 23mm tubulars, and it brings back memories when you see, and they're beautiful tubulars. Wow, they've got some amazing tyres in there, and on floorboards they're great, but on road I don't miss those days.
So what is the progression you've seen in wheel building? Because, I mean, like, I'd love to go down the rabbit hole of tyre width like we talked about earlier on, and certainly into tubulars as well. But over this progression, like, we've moved from tubulars to clinchers to tubeless to now hookless. You've seen it all. How have you experienced that progression?
So the first amazement I had with a wheel was Jan Ulrich coming through the town near where I worked with the lightweight wheel, and it had the Kevlar spokes on it.
Oh, yeah.
So it had those beautiful yellow Kevlar spokes with the sharp little ugly carbon rim, which is a beautiful wheel until you break a spoke and then it's toast. But I
Or
remember...
in crosswinds, as I found out.
Not aerodynamic, but actually very stiff and super light.
Super light and extraordinarily responsive to ride with as well.
It's because they're stiff as
They're
hell.
so stiff. But yes, so it's interesting. Like from an aerodynamic point of view, when you looked at them back in the day, they looked like they were the most aerodynamic thing in the world.
Oh, they're
But that's-
Oh, yeah.
But it was, back when everyone just thought aero was, straight angles. but they're actually quite the opposite. And again, performed really poor in crosswinds, but light, stiff, fast, great climbing wheels.
Yeah, exactly. And I had a carbon fiber windsurfer from 1992, a Mark Angulo, or his dad actually made it. It was a slalom board. So I knew about carbon and I knew how to stuff it up, because I made a massive mistake with that windsurfer putting polyester resin into EPS foam, and it ate it like acid. So again, back to boats, you learn what not to do, and then hopefully can progress that through to making, good decisions in not in engineering, but just the structural basis of the wheel. So when I saw that wheel in 1997, I was like, wow, so carbon's a thing in bikes. But I didn't touch it again for another probably 4 or 5 years after that.
Yeah.
And then the progression, to answer your question, was aluminium and carbon, and very ugly interfaces between the aluminium and the carbon. So there was no laminar flow across the wheel. In fact, there's no laminar flow really across wheels until probably, getting more towards 2010, when you looked at that. They called it toroidal, I think. Zip took it off head, and then they ended up having a big argument, and then they co-shared the patent. And this is such a stupid patent. I couldn't believe it existed.
The toroidal shape of the wind. So instead of looking like, a triangle, it looked like you had your hands and you had it cupped around. So the profiles we're so used to today, like the bulge in the center of the rim and then rolling around the top. And yes, the toroidal argument.
The basis of the argument was that you couldn't have the midpoint of the wheel wider than the brake track, effectively. And that's just unenforceable. But for some reason it was a thing, and I thought I'd better not step on those toes. So I made flat-edged rims for a while, and then that progressed to that patent, being kicked out of court, which it eventually did, which was the realistic thing because it was a bullshit patent.
Yeah.
And then you had more obvious aerodynamic shapes where you could have a proper foil, where the leading edge is a lot smaller than the midpoint of the rim, the widest point, should I say, which is about a third back from the rim, from the leading edge, and then bleeding off into a trailing edge. So wheels are never going to have a perfect profile shape ever, because you've got a dirty big tyre on the thing. So it's not about the wheel, it's about creating a tail for the tyre, and you need to create that on two sides, which is when then the progression moved, instead of a sharp spoke bed, it moved to a blunt spoke bed, because then you're creating a leading edge for the back half of the wheel. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You've got a front half of a wheel that's a little bit less aero with a blunt edge, and then you've got a rear half of the wheel that is a lot more aero, because it then has a leading edge that doesn't split the wind and creates an attached laminar flow around the whatever, straight on, or much better from a yaw angle especially.
What about the transition of other technologies around the actual interface between the rim and the tyre?
So then you moved from clinches with resin systems were actually the most big leap in carbon fiber manufacturing. So the carbon hasn't changed at all, but resin, my God, that is very exotic. It's funny because I've been for years in the same factory where Giant and DT Swiss Profile Designer, etc. And once I've seen them mixing the resin, and they mix it on the floor with like mops, not mops, like squeegees.
Wow.
And they're mixing a lot of it. This factory has its own in-house carbon loom, okay? There's only 2 factories in Xiamen that have their own in-house carbon looms. That's Top Key, where Specialized, Cannondale, Scott, blah, 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 all those big wigs are. And then you've got Stren, where you've got the biggest part of the rim production. I don't mind saying that name because good luck getting in there. You've got Buckley's.
Yeah.
I know that owner very well, and he gets very nice scotch off me. He gets flowers for his wife, and I'm the smallest client in there by a country goddamn mile, and they only just do enough rims for me. But he's an absolute composites gun. He used to pick me up in a horrible car back, in 2010, and now he picks me up in a Maybach.
Wow.
So yeah, they're doing well.
That's the way.
And anything you hear about China, don't believe it. They are free as a bird to innovate. They don't have regulation as far as government controls of factories and things like that. They pay a very low tax rate, so they really run risk, which you need to move forward. If you don't have a very high risk threshold, everything we see, they've failed at 100 times before we see it. Luckily, they do very weird shapes though. me going over there, I make shapes that are more tried and tested and will perform, touch wood, better in a race situation, whereas their shapes are much more aesthetic. They do these weird, bendy, weird things and very different. So the innovation from them is more around the manufacturing, luckily, than the design side of things. Because if they got the design side and the manufacturing right, then they wouldn't need any of us Westerners. So
Correct.
I'm pretty happy that they like making some.
So as long as we don't have wild tariffs on design, we'll probably be okay for the while with our Chinese brethren.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful city, man. Xiamen is amazing, but it's very hard to get in because they've been burnt by a lot of people that don't pay their bills, etc. So I always pay in advance and have a very good name over there, and that allows me to work with some really interesting engineers. And like this little cut up bit of TT disc here where Garner had his discs made and lots of other people. And
What's that a cut up of?
That's a TT disc.
Yep.
So it's a Davini cell foam laminate sandwich, like a windsurfer used to be made in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it's hollow.
So my question about this now, earlier on you talked about you go from the rim bed to create the widest part of the wheel.
Yes.
Generally in a normal rim, you're looking for it about a third away from your leading edge.
Yeah.
Now, when I'm looking at this side disc, I see a really interesting profile here where you've got the I suppose the rim bed.
Yeah.
Is this a rim? Just assume like this is a disc wheel.
Yeah, full disc.
Full
Full
disc.
rear TT disc, yeah.
So you've got what would have been the rim brake track dropping down, then bulging out quite close to it before the profile back towards the hub.
Guess
What-
10
what came-
points for guessing who designed that.
My son has just said it was himself.
That's one of those things I was talking about before on the wall in China. So that's one
really?
of their designs. And do you see how unaerodynamic it is?
Well, that's what I was just to say.
Yeah, you were spotting it. You're trying to nicely
this-
say to me, Ben, why have you given me this
Why
piece
are you
of crap?
giving me this clearly unaerodynamic shape? I don't know how to say nice things about it.
Oh, it's horrible.
I could just ask questions.
It's horrible. That's why it's cut up.
Oh, good.
Yeah, okay. So, You look at it.
Oh, yeah.
It's a horrible, weird thing. But they love that stuff, which is good for them because it's not good aerodynamically. And I'd rather make something that's really
But maybe there's some good things to talk. Now, I'm looking here at the bond here between the two pieces of carbon. And when you look at the cut-up, even where it comes through, it actually looks like it's relatively clean.
Yeah.
Now, you've brought a good point up there. Now, look at that bond and think, oh, that's a visual bond on the outside. My brain does not think of that bond. It thinks of this bond.
Yeah.
Look at this. You cannot delaminate that. That foam, it's totally stuck to the unidirectional. So that is a crazy process, and I'm not going to tell you how they do that. That is amazing how they get that 1 mil layer of PMI sheet to not delaminate from the carbon without using a lot of resin. Because if they use a heap of resin, they get very heavy.
And that's always been the issue with rear discs as well, just putting so much resin in to keep it together.
Yeah. So that process there, that was years and years of them doing it. Because these used to delaminate all the time. They'd get in the sun and you'd get like a hot day, like a 40-degree day or something, and this would sit out in the sun and you get these bubbles
bake.
on them. A long time ago, but yeah.
It's quite impressive.
Yeah, and they're the things that matter. Those weird little things that you never would expect that they've spent so many years and years and years developing. And it's the way, like in boat building, you see errors and you learn from the errors. They're your best friend if you bother to look at them. My main development is always through hunting for the error. A lot of people try to avoid them, and I hunt for them.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. So as aero progresses, like we've seen a lot in the last 10 years, and when we talk about the idea of the blunt edge versus the trailing edge, and it seems just so obvious now to us.
Yeah.
What's coming in the next 10 years, or is it a case that what's coming in the next 10 years is already being tinkered with in this ideas lab over in China that you think is going to take us to the next level as we think about aerodynamics and cycling?
Can you lend me the crystal ball that we're
Yeah.
trying to... No. I will answer it as well as I can. If I knew the answer to that properly, I'd be a very rich man. All I can do is look at that situation going back to 1997 with Jan Ulrich and go, that was a leap, an absolute leap, leaping from a whole material and fundamental understanding of a product to a new one. Will we get another leap? I don't know. Will we get very good measurable incremental returns? Because back then they couldn't test anything. I can't see any materials coming in. There's a couple of materials that have proven something, but they can't get them above a nano level. They can't form them into a string. What's that stuff they put in Vittoria tyres? I'm having a mental blank.
Graphene.
Graphene. You can't use graphene.
Yes,
my brother does a lot of
extraordinarily difficult to work with.
My brother does a lot of IPO listings for big finance companies, and they had all these graphene companies. They've all gone bankrupt. Not all, but a lot of them have, because you can't actually use it. Maybe putting particles into a tyre is of some benefit besides marketing. I don't know. If you could form graphene into a string, then yes, we could have a leap, because that stuff is amazing.
Incredible, yeah.
It is amazing, but it's on a nano level or whatever level that it's on. So carbon, we're stuck with string and glue. Obviously, it was fiberglass. It moved to carbon. The next step would be graphene, if possible. But as far as I can only talk about wheels on a level of any interest to anyone, and I see the incremental changes that are much more measurable. So to answer your question, the biggest change is testing. Like today, to be able to sit in a velodrome and test things at a quite acute level is amazing. You know, we're there for 4 or 5 hours in a real world situation, and we can define how much quicker a clincher tyre is on a track bike versus a tubular. If you said clincher in a velodrome 4 years ago, people would laugh you out of the velodrome, and now we're looking at it on a serious level. America ran on the female team and won gold on clinchers in Paris, for example. I think it was Paris, sorry. I don't know enough, but I was speaking to them today and they're talking about the women's team winning on clinchers.
Is this because the interface with the clincher to the bead is just nicer? You don't have as much turbulence. You get a nicer laminar profile from the tyre to the rim that you can't get with a tubular?
That's a smaller part of it. Rolling resistance is the bigger part of it.
Okay.
And handling is the other bigger part of it. And then, sorry, the main one, and I spoke with David Betts about this a lot in detail this morning. When I was putting all the tubular tyres on, I said, "Where's your truing stand? I need to true the tyre onto the wheel." And he's like, "Oh, good. I'm glad you do that." Because putting a tubular tyre on, they're very lumpy unless you check them and really massage them into place. So a clincher tyre is generally quite round and true on the rim, so your rolling will obviously be in a straighter line, whereas a tubular can get quite lumpy. So
I can attest from trying to fit tubulars back when I started cycling that it is akin to just trying to kick yourself in the face.
Yeah.
It is a pointless and difficult exercise.
I got some blisters there already today.
So in the track clincher that you were testing today, what are you running inside of them? Are you running them tubeless? Are you running them with tubes?
No, with tubes.
So TPU tubes, butyl
we
tubes?
did both.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. We did TPU and we did latex.
Yep.
The problem was we blew up the latex tube. It wasn't us, it was a seam tear. So it was a failed tube.
Yep.
So we didn't get to test that today, which was a real bugger.
Okay.
I would have loved to have
You should
done
have
that.
called me up. I had some latex tubes here.
I know I had some latex things in my bag, but they weren't for tyres.
Just didn't fit in the tyre.
Yeah. So we didn't get to test that today. I don't think, the latex tube I was using was the TPU tube I was using was 30 grams. I don't think the latex would have provided maybe a measurable difference, maybe not. The resolution's pretty good on those aero testers, but maybe not that good.
Yeah.
That's more a specific rolling resistance rig test, but it's a good question.
Yep.
I think the majority of track cyclists will be using latex, not TPU.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the difference between the clincher and the tubular, was there a noticeable difference?
I was hoping for more.
Yep.
I spoke to you as we walked in. I was like, today was a bit of a mixed bag. I really didn't get enough defined results to go, I can sink my teeth into something.
Yep.
So admittedly, as I said, the resolution is good, but it's not as good as, going to Silverstone on their rolling resistance rig and doing an aero test. So I will repeat the tests and then you try to back them up in a real world situation and see if you can get a repeatable result.
Yeah.
But yeah, today we got some aero differences, which was good. the tyre difference wasn't enough. But the tyre we're using actually wasn't the tyre I would have liked to have used. The clincher, that is. The tubulars were beautiful.
Yep.
So, yeah, we just got to keep going and keep doing it.
Although is there something to be said for, again, a total system where part of the system is the maintenance of the wheel, the ability to put tires on and off, change them out, and the ease of work for mechanics. So, I mean, maybe at an Olympic level, certainly you're going to go to the nth degree, but maybe for, everyone who's been showing up at track nationals recently here at Anna Meares, both juniors, elites, and they may be thinking, well, if a clincher, which is far more easier for us or the bank of mum and dad to get behind or work with when their son or daughter is at the track, maybe that system approach might actually be something really useful. So that there's nothing lost from the testing if there's something we can shout about to the up-and-coming cyclists.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, if it's not worse and it's easier to use,
Exactly.
It's already better.
Exactly.
As long as it doesn't blow off. There's definitely no hookless down at the
Yeah.
the velodrome.
And now, what is your opinion on
Talk to us about hookless.
Yes.
I mean, the ship sailed there, boys. Come on, let's be
Yeah.
real. Well, let's have a chat about it anyway.
Come
but,
on.
I'm not into sadomasochism. Whenever I crash, I lose freckles, and hookless. If I rode it enough, I'm sure I'd have a lot less freckles. I'm joking. It's there's some brands that have got it to reasonably function, but there's some brands that haven't. I'm not going to talk names, but one big brand in particular has an issue with it. You leave your bike in the sun at 60 psi, the sun gets on it, she shoots up to 90 psi pretty quick, and hey presto, bang, and everyone at the cafe shits themselves. Now, I've been able to resolve that by putting tubes into the same setup, tubeless tyre or clincher on a tubeless hook, and that boundary layer has actually stopped the blow-offs. Now, I'm not saying this is going to work for everyone. I'm just telling you what I've tried personally, and I've done it enough to repeat it to go, hey, this is a possible resolution for some people out there that are worried. So running a boundary layer internally, because the main thing that's happening with tubeless, just so you know, is that unlike mountain bike, road tyres sit inbound of the burp hook, and you don't have a self-seating effect. So I don't mind tubeless at all and hookless on mountain bike because it's a very different animal. Whereas the moment you put a tyre inside of a burp hook and you get a slight leak under there, it turns from a seating force to a de-seating force in a split second, and then air follows path of least resistance, and a small amount of it at a very high pressure shoots out the side, and it takes the tyre bang up off the rim with it. And that's where a lot of the blow-offs are coming from, especially if you burp it. ET RTO rules are, tyres have to be much bigger than the rim, and hardly anyone's following those rules.
Yeah.
Most people I look at, almost all cyclists I see, I'm like, that tyre is not within the ETR RTO rules. And I don't mind flaunting the rules myself, but I'm not telling you to do it. It's just that they're there for a reason, because the seating effect, the ballooning effect of a mountain bike tyre is the reason that rule is in place. That behaves itself, whereas a small road tyre on a wide rim doesn't behave itself. Does that make sense?
No, it's it's really, really interesting to go through this, because as we think about different tyre sizes, because as we've gone, and Freebs and I were riding earlier on this week, and we were like, because he had been at the track and he was talking about 21 millimeter tires, 23 millimeter tires. I remember going to 25 and thinking this is crazy, where now I've got 28s and 30s, and as those have grown and we've got rim profiles grown, now we've entered into this area where hookless, tubeless starts to look like it could work with road bike tires. But in fact, I think what we're hearing is, but we're still not getting maybe the same level of difference between the outer tire, like the wider tire, versus the rim to get the seating effect. But of course, the downside to that is then you start to play with the aerodynamic properties of the tire wheel interface. So where's the balancing point, do you think?
That's where you get to, for example, look at the Grand Tours, Tour de France, for example. Almost all the TT bikes have tubes running in their tubeless tyres, or clinches with tubes. The reason they're doing that is you want to run a much smaller tyre on a wider rim to get proper adhesion of the air around the side and get the laminar flow. So if you're running a 25 on a 25 mil internal rim with a 34 external, you want to run a tube in that.
Yeah, you should probably put a tube in that.
Yeah.
And they're doing it. So that's and they're not getting it. This is the best thing. I love tubeless compatible wheels with a tube and tire because you get almost all the advantage of tubeless with none of the negatives and the danger. And it can be very dangerous. I mean, I've dealt with it. When you deal with something tens of or thousands and thousands of times, you learn risk reward ratio, and you look at it and you go, hey, am I getting a gain here for this risk? Yes or no? And in mountain bike, yes, you are getting a gain, but with road, it's marginal, especially when you're running, a good size aero tire. So if you have a lightweight tube inside a tubeless wheel, you don't pinch flat. Like it's not impossible to pinch flat if the rim goes over the edge, but if that happens, you're going to cook your tubeless tire anyway and probably puncture. But you don't get the tube getting caught under the bead of the tire. So you get almost all that advantage of not pinch flatting. And then if you want to run sealant, you're much better off running it in your tube because you don't get the dehydration factor. It doesn't sweat as much. So instead of 2 to 3 month, tire life, you get a 6 month or 7 month.
I'm so glad he said it. I was literally going to add, this is my next thing. Has anyone been experimenting with sealant in the tube within a tubeless tire? Because it seems like whilst you're taking a minor weight penalty, because now you're adding sealant as well as the tube, but if you think about, let's say an unsupported Gran Fondo where you do want to get to the end and maybe not lose 5-6 minutes booming around, with a little hand pump friskily at the side, hoping that you're not going to make the time cut. But we're on the sealant. Is this something that you've tried, that you've seen start to make its way up in the kind of the amateur ranks and pro ranks?
Yeah, I've been. When was it? Probably 2010 is the first time I put sealant in a tube. And it wasn't actually me. It was a mechanic over in Manly that did it for me. And I was like, that's cool. And then I remember I was riding along and this spray of stuff came out and then it just stopped. And I was like, what was that? And I was looking around on the road trying to work it out. And then I realized, I was like, wow, that was the sealant working. So the first time I used it back in 2010, it worked. So I went, okay, well, that's something interesting. I'll keep looking at that. The key factor is when you're using sealant in a tube, you need to take the valve core out, you fill the tube up with water, you massage the hell out of it, you shake it around, then you pour the water and the powder out of the tube, especially for a latex tube.
Right.
And then you don't get the reaction with sometimes the sealant can react with the powder, or at a minimum, it's going to dehydrate it a little bit. And when you do that, you get a really long shelf life out of it, and you don't actually get a weight penalty because you only need to use 20 mil of it compared to 100 mil.
Cool, yeah.
And then your tubes these days are down to 30 grams. And the good thing is, if you ever have a problem, you just whip that tube out. There's no filthy, sticky mess. And if you go to put a tube back in there, it's very easy because try getting a tube back in a dehydrated, sticky, tubeless wheel. They don't go in, then you pinch them and you DNF your race. Whereas this way you can pull it straight out and put a new one in without having an issue. And I usually do that, 2 to 3 weeks before a race. So I know it's set up well. It's no issues have come across it. And then you got fresh sealant. Whereas most people are going into a race with a wheel that's 3-4 months old. The sealant's cooked. It's done for.
Yeah.
Unless you're topping it up a lot, and then you got a really heavy wheel full of gluggy half-cooked sealant.
No, like over the weekend, I literally went through this process. I was like looking at my wheels, because I was like fretting over wheel choice. And then I was like, when did I even put these tires on? I can't remember if I've even got sealant in them.
Wow.
So I've pulled the tires off, and sure enough, all the sealant is gone, completely dehydrated.
Well, the big question there is, what wheel choice did you go for?
Oh,
what are you running this weekend?
So this weekend, there has been a lot of wringing of hands. There has been a lot of fretting. There's been a lot of staring at road maps, staring at the course that we have for the Tour de Brisbane and going, do I go a 40 mil depth, slightly wider, slightly lighter, or do I go for a 60 mil depth, slightly faster, slightly heavier, but slightly narrower? And so I'm trying to think about how the course is. I think there's a great quote from Cameron Meyer, who talks about when he was trying to pick bikes or things. He's like, I don't pick the bike for the race. I pick the bike for the moment in the race. And so it just depends on how you're approaching. And so what I think, and this will be going out after, so this will be prophetically terrific, or I'll just sound like an idiot, or maybe both. Who knows? But I feel like the critical point is the last 40 kilometers.
Yeah,
I think the last 40 kilometers is where like everyone will go up the hill relatively quickly. We're on the non-steep side this time. I know for a fact that the aero effect of going with people or with a group there is more advantageous. And so I think when we get to the flatter fast sections, that's where I'm going. I've also gone for a bigger chain ring size as well.
Ooh, big goal.
Look out.
Here we go.
But on that, let's turn around because we're on the backside poddy. I wonder what would be the right type of depth combination. What is the right type of width combination? Can you talk us through if you were building the perfect wheel depths, wheel sizes to tackle the backside, to take that 5:59 time, what would you do? Talk us through it.
I wish I'd ridden it so I could actually know. But you did show me the profile before and gave me a reasonable explanation of it. So it's a reasonably consistent uphill climb at an average of about 20k an hour. Is that correct?
For the com, it's 22.5k.
22 and a half, yeah.
Okay, so you're moving. So aerodynamics becomes a part of it, and weight. So you've got that you're fighting the balance of the two. There'll be some sections that are quite quick and then some that are climbing. So this is, for a pure moment of the race, as you pointed out, I would go like a super deep dish front wheel and then a pissy little lightweight rear wheel.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like, are we talking 80 mil front?
Yeah. Go deep, go big, go deep, aero on the front.
I did not expect
And then
that.
go super light on the back because your aero is like 70% front wheel. So you've got some fast sections and you're looking to save weight as well. You're getting the best of both worlds. If you were going just super fast, it would be the opposite. You'd just go like big TT disc on the front and a big wheel on, big TT disc on the back and a big one. But the moment you're climbing, and I am sort of stealing that idea for some crazy Englishmen that I've seen doing that over in the UK hill climbs. And the UK are very good at their hill climbing, whether it's race cars or bikes. And I looked at one of the guy's bike and I was like, bro, that's a badass setup. That's like a reverse mullet.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reverse mullet.
And I was like, good for you, Salah. What's going on? And he explained it. And I looked at it. I walked over and I was like, and he wasn't a very good, it wasn't an amazing bike at all. But it did, make sense. Yeah.
Now that surprised me.
I was not expecting that.
No. Well, on Cootha next week, we'll see all these 80 mil wheels getting up there.
Well, I tell you what, I'm pretty sure Freeves is 100 mil deep wheel. I'm like, maybe we can get that one up with a Mavic Open Pro on the back.
All right, now if it's blowing above 30 knots, don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty protected, so wind's not a factor. But you mentioned the reverse mullet. We're seeing now there's a bit of a trend of the mullet setup.
Yep.
In terms of running a smaller depth rim at the front and a deeper depth at the rear. What's the theory behind that?
For all-round riding, yes, that is better.
Yeah.
So I was trying to be a bit controversial before.
Yeah, it is.
No,
I'm a big, what would you call it? A big advocate, of smaller front tyre, larger rear tyre, and the same on the wheel setup for general riding. So,
so like a 28 front, 30 mil rear?
Yeah, either, even it goes either 23 front, 25 rear. Time trialing you can go down to if you've got a good road. Don't think big tyres are the be-all and end-all. If you've got a perfect road, man, you go a small tyre. That thing will be quicker. Because tyres have this weird spring rate difference. People don't know this. A smaller tyre has a lower effective spring rate than a bigger tyre. So a smaller tyre at, say, 80 PSI will be a lot softer than a 30 mil tyre at the same pressure. So you have to run bigger tyres at a lot lower pressure to get the same comfort level out of them. So if you're running on a perfect road, you can run a higher pressure and not have any real negative impact in rolling resistance, but you'll get a lot of benefit in aerodynamics. This is more for me thinking in my triathlete brain and time trialing. But regardless of what you're doing, a smaller front, bigger rear is best advantage for all types of riding.
What about, I think we talked earlier on as well, you said that it's better to have a wider front and a thinner rear. So, and we are seeing some wheel manufacturers doing that as well.
Only better to cheat aerodynamic results. not for all-round riding. In my humble opinion. Alex from Peak Talk also brought that up, and a few other riders have brought that up. Jesse got some of my wheels the other day. He was having a few issues with his wheels getting blown around a little bit, and he's got a set off me, which he's now testing. Similar depth, actually a little bit deeper on the front than he even had before. So we'll see how that works for him. But he prefers a bigger rear. He doesn't want a smaller rear tyre. He wants a bigger rear tyre because look at your rear tyre, it wears out twice as quick as your front. Why would you want a narrower internal on your rear than your front? Because there's only a bee's dick of aerodynamic advantage to squashing that in, but the rolling resistance will be better with the wider one on the rear. So you will make up that aerodynamic tunnel difference, but in real world, it's going to be slower, even though, selling it and marketing is going to look a tiny bit better.
Oh, yeah, and then I suppose it's been nice to see this real world approach, even with the larger tires, larger wheels, of understanding the system between rolling resistance, tire pressure, and aerodynamics of wheels. But you touched on crosswinds and crosswind stability. We've seen certainly a lot of wheels now experimenting with different sawtooth profiles and even different layups on their rims to try and work with crosswinds. Have you done any testing with different yaw angles, and what kind of shapes are you seeing starting to work well and ones that are still maybe in their experimentation phases?
Yeah, so the main difference on the front end is the depth, followed closely by the rim tire interface. Shapes of the wheel, it provides a little bit of benefit maybe, but it's hard to even measure. I look at that recent test that was done of the 10 wheels, and Princeton was the only sawtooth, or whatever they would like to call it. That was what Zip called it back in the day. They were the only one that had that, and it performed in the mid to bottom, I think, for the whole test. And all the other wheels that were a standard round inner rim to round outer were performing better than it. It's not a major negative at all. I just don't think it's providing a huge amount of benefit. I heard it does provide some benefit in the feel of crosswinds. It probably breaks the air up a little bit or something.
Yeah, that's what I found. Like
you've been trialing a shark tooth profile there, the fulcrums, right?
Yeah, correct. And that's like the stability is the standout feature for me is like in the crossies, it feels real stable. So that was quite surprising. But
a big thing for stability is not running too big a front tyre. The moment you run a tyre where you get a flow separation off the tyre and don't get proper laminar flow around the rim, you get a buffeting, angry air, and that really moves it. So Corey today, he was out on one of the Karima tri-spokes, which is only 22 mil wide with a 23 mil tubular tyre. And then, so it's a narrow little thing. This is track. We're going back to track. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Going back to track before anyone just rolls over. And then he was out on my wheel, which is 30 mil wide with a 23 mil tubular. Now, it's not 30 wide at the tyre interface. It's 30 mil wide back.
So what are you, 25 millimeters on the internal?
25 at the rim tip.
Yeah.
And then going out to just a bit under 30, actually. Anyway, he said it was the moment he'd hit the corner, he goes, the front wheel just behaved. It just didn't want to go offline. Whether that's the stiffness of the wheel, I don't know. I'm not 100%, but I really do. I know out in the road, at least, if you go up from a 25 on an older style wheel to a 28 or a 30, you'll get blown around a lot more. Unless you have a really wide wheel that can handle it. So yeah, that's a factor.
That's really interesting. Goodness gracious.
it is.
I've been wide-eyed this entire episode.
Just dropping truth
bombs.
I may be wrong in some of these things. Like, this is my opinion as well. Like, there's a lot of people out there with different understandings of this. I just have to deal with it all day long, every day. And when you hear from enough clients and you feel it yourself, but then you hear from 20, 30, 40 clients and you're like, oh, okay, there's a pattern there. So I hope there's some some foundation to it anyway.
Yeah, and look, one of the great things about cycling is shared experiences, and how we feel about the sport and how we feel riding the bikes. And of course, we froth on all of the technology, but ultimately it's drives us out. It drives these stories. So it's wonderful to hear these anecdotal experiences. but linked across to some real technical testing. So I'm really excited to hear about how the things with Silverstone goes as well. I've been to Silverstone myself, not for aero testing, for something else.
The racetrack?
For the racetrack,
Yes,
yeah. And
yes.
it's a lot of fun. But to go to one of those wind tunnels would be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to define the parts of the wheel which make a difference. So I haven't seen a test that's done it. I haven't seen a test that's defined how many spokes make what difference. Hiding a nipple, and there's lots of them, you know, there's 21, 24, 18, whatever there are, and they're right on that critical part of the rim where the air has to get around that, especially to your angle, and it really chops it. So it's going to be cool to go, well, hey, wait up, we got, from just hiding the nipples, we got this amount? Wow, that's a big jump. Is that the difference that makes up the fastest wheel that there is, or is it that, you know, profile shape of the rim, or is it the shark finish, or whatever they're calling it on top? So it'll be cool to define that.
Oh, it's going to be so exciting.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think I could still go down rabbit holes on wheels. I don't think I could stop talking about it, but I'm interested to know if there's other parts of the bikes now which have been making leaps forward. You know, obviously front aero extensions are one of them. Is there anything that you're seeing being played around with which you think that's really interesting, or things that you're playing around with yourself, other componentry on the bikes?
Yeah, I mean, look at track. If you want to see real aero, look at track. That's the best way to see real aero. There's a lot of road stuff that is good, but there's a lot that's just marketing. So looking at the velodrome today, forks, wide forks,
super wide forks.
That bottleneck coming off the rim, especially as wheels go wider, they create a huge bottleneck right at that junction, the tip of the fork crown, or the base of the fork crown, should I say, where the air just can't get through. So you go deeper on the wheel and you go wider, you've just got this massive blockage. Wow. So having a wider fork, yes. Rear chain stays, nothing on the rear of the bike matters as much as the front. Nothing. Having those rear chain stays looks so cool though.
Yeah. So when you seen the Hope bike come out, when it had like those drastic forks, which was it was trying to solve two problems. First, the bottleneck up at the wheel to down tube interface, but also the idea of, well, if we're going to put the forks out, let's just put them in the way of the rider's legs and create this system. And they've got this wild bike showing up.
Yeah, and 200,000. My wallet feels light just talking about that bike. And I know what the wheels cost as well today. I just found out. I won't say it, but wow. Amazing company. Like, what an innovative. That's really the first in a major track innovation I've seen since Lotus.
Oh, the Lotus bike, yeah.
I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen anything where my eyes have just gone, what the hell is that? And that Lotus bike back in the day was just, wow.
It was incredible.
So the English do some really, really amazing stuff. Other main advantages, I mean, nutrition's just a massive one. Look at the amount we eat now.
Correct.
Far out, wow. What else?
Oh my gosh. So I went down to
shoe covers.
I went down to Bike Bug today to get all my nutrition for the weekend.
Did you load up on some Sturka?
I actually did get some Sturka.
Yeah.
A bag of it, and I laid it down, and I was like counting up all the grams, and I'm like, for 1 hour, that's what I would know, what I used to do for 3 hours.
It's insane, isn't it?
And it's insane. Now, obviously, we've been doing some training now to try and make sure that my gut can actually handle it. Thankfully, I'm also used to drinking, 12 pints. So, little bit of ability to take a lot of, carbohydrates. But it's crazy nutrition and the things that we're seeing what the body is able to do, even under duress when it's processing. Yeah,
I mean, talking about Bike Bug, Frank and Rocky, what bloody legends they are, those two guys. That company has just been one of Australia's biggest bike shops for years and years, and they had FRF couriers as well. But the reason I bring those guys up, because I've been going there for forever. Yeah. And I actually drove Rocky's C8 Corvette. Was it last Christmas or the Christmas before? So you're a car man if you're talking about Silverstone racetrack. And we're at this Christmas party. Frank wasn't there, but Rocky was there, and all the Greek boys were there, and they're all legends. They're just lovely guys, and they've got some very nice toys. And Rocky turned up in his C8 Corvette, and I went out and had a look at it, and he's like, "Go take it for a drive." And I was like, "You didn't have to ask me twice." So Yeah, man, props to those guys. Amazing business.
they've
I
done
still
well.
buy a heap of stuff through BikeBug.
Very good.
I mean, they obviously sold it out, but Rocky
Yeah.
has still been working there on and
Yeah.
off for the whole transition period. Yeah.
Now, what do you see the future of Caden? Like, what's the future of Caden? I've seen some few little things you're doing. I've seen a bike floating around. I've seen handlebars floating around.
Oh, is there a bike?
Yeah.
I've seen brake rotors.
I really I love Graham Obrey.
Oh, Graham.
Not in a
O'Brien.
gay way.
And that's okay too.
But I love
Good
the
racer.
fact that he made the quickest bike on the planet. Like, we talk about that Hope bike, we talk about the Lotus bike. They're nothing compared to that freaking washing machine backyard hack job that legend built. And I've built my own Obrey bike recently. It was just a pet project when I was developing the bike. All I did is got a huge long steerer tube and bonded it in. One of the boys from ARA actually helped me with the machining of the dowel to join them together. So I've got a steerer tube that's literally, like, I'm 2 meters tall almost. And the front end of the bike, I've forgotten, it's like $1.50 high.
Oh my God!
Jeepers.
It's
tall as I am.
but I'm dead flat when I put my chest down on it, and my arms, like a normal handlebar. It's an integrated cockpit bike, but you can rest on your chest on the top of the handlebar, if you can visualize this, people out there. And then your hands come up and you lean down, and my back is dead flat. And I've been spotted many times around Heffron riding it early in the morning testing, because it's embarrassing to ride it. It is seriously ugly. But my God, it's quick. I've done my quickest lap around Heffron. I've done a lot of triathlon around Heffron over the years, and I've done my quickest lap there by a country mile on it. So that's just a random little...
Do you reckon the UCI would pass that?
Yeah, for sure.
They can barely administer their own rules, let alone administer a new bike position.
Yeah, for a sock length. But to be on a serious note, yes, the bike it's actually called the Caden RDTT, which is a road time trial bike. My real love is time trial and triathlon. And I don't like TT bikes a lot, though. I'm just too big a unit.
Sacrilege! I love my TT bike.
I do like them, but I just love a roadie with a really integrated cockpit with aero bars on the roadie, because then I can be in the aero bars all the time, practicing and training, and constantly get in the aero bars, whereas otherwise you're just on your TT bike and your shoulders are never strong enough. So that's what the bike is for. So it's called the RDTT. You can crit race on it, you can gravel race on it. It takes up to a 38mm rear tyre and a 50 front. So it's really an all-round bike, and the integrated cockpit on the front is freaking epic. If you look on my Insta page, you'll see some sneak peeks of the cockpit that I built myself, and it's actually an 18-foot skiff mast that I've cut a slither out of at an angle, going back to the sailing days, and then just put a rod through it, and your hands fit through it beautifully, and then I put some SRAM blips on it, and it's the lightest cockpit by about 100 grams.
Wow.
Wow. Because I certainly in the last at least 2 years, there have been a couple of really extreme cockpits for road bikes.
Yeah. And they're very expensive.
And they're very expensive. And a couple have been banned as well. An interesting kind of taking that concept forward of how far forward can you go, how low can you go, and how narrow can you go. So I didn't even know you were experimenting with that. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, so that's it's a bike. I'm a wheel builder. I do the bike, and there's a lot of mates of mine that ride that bike and race that bike already. But the main, to answer your question, direction for Caden is I really would love to have my wheels on the Australian track team for LA Olympics. That's one of the big focuses. I'd love to beat that scope. RTEC 60. We'll see at Silverstone. I hope I should get very close to it. I've got a great base in Spain. I'd love to spend more time over there.
Where in Spain?
So it's right near San Sebastian.
Oh.
So that's where I learned to build wheels, just north of that, just north of Biarritz. And yeah, it's a really good base. So hopefully I can get over there and do some work around the Pyrenees. Johnny's a legend. I've had that base in Spain for over 8 years now.
Oh, wow.
Because the duty to get stuff into Europe is ridiculous, as you know, Johnny.
Yeah.
And so we send direct into there and build, so then I can send things in a timely fashion throughout Europe. So if anyone's listening from Europe, yeah, we've got a big following in Spain and France. And send
Hola, amigos.
Yeah.
It's traditional for me to butcher some European accents, so apologies to the Spanish today.
But if anyone's ridden in the Pyrenees, man, it's beautiful. Yeah. Can I give you guys some carbon spokes to break now? Is that all right?
Yes, let's break some spokes.
Let's break some stuff.
Okay.
Talk us through tell us what you've brought. Talk us through what you
just
have
brought
in
some
front
random
of us
stuff off my desk.
And why. What
was
do you
like-
want to show us and what do you want to tell the
Microphone
listeners?
down so I can. This is just some random stuff that was sitting on my desk. Some cut up profiles. I'll show you the first one. So, ring barking on a steerer tube, where those little horrible FSA style collars that hold your whole weight of your bike. So on my bike, I was like, I'm not going to use the FSA collar for an integrated system because that is just like the worst. Those 2 points hold all your brake loading through the fork on the steerer tube, which is why you'll see hundreds of videos about, steerer tube failure and ring barking. Have a look at my my steerer tube. Look at that. What do you think would support the fork better?
The meaty bloody
30 mil versus 5 mil,
Wow.
and full circle around the steerer tube.
Yeah, we'll put
I just
a
3D printed this
photo
myself.
up of this. But again, anyone who's pulled apart their headset, in one hand we've got like about a 5 millimeter,
alloy.
three quarter alloy circle versus what looks almost like the riser piece on your integrated handlebars, and it's about 50 mil deep.
30.
Oh, 30 mil deep.
The problem was the cables. I was like, I don't want this gap in the front.
Yes.
So what I've done here, you can actually take this out without having to cut your cables and then put this in.
Hey.
So
yeah,
then I've
it's
got a little
really
cover
quite
that
neat
sits
interface.
over the front there.
So have you 3D printed this?
Yeah, I just designed it myself and
Yeah.
3D printed at home.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty cool. That's a random thing to stop your steerer tube snapping, which is not a good day out. Here's,
Jeez, it's light too, hey?
This is not a butt plug, I swear.
Oh,
This is that's a bearing press. So the race team were having issues pressing bearings out on the road, so I designed a bearing press.
yep.
That is
that's
the most
for my,
neat bearing press I've ever seen
It
in my
is the
life.
simplest. I'm a big believer in keep it as simple as humanly possible. And anyway, I'm just pulling apart a hub now. So this here is my new hub. You can see here, this little piece goes in here so you can hit the axle out.
Oh, yep.
And once you've hit the axle out, you use the press to press the bearings back in.
Yep.
The free hub body, you need to always support that in the center. So you have this in here, and then you have that in there, and then you literally just get a hand hammer and just tap it on there. And because the boys are racing in Europe, man, it gets wet. Like I mean, wet up to your hub's wet. So to be able to swap that out in the middle of between two races is pretty cool.
Have bearing replacements ever been easier?
Not recent, as a few months back, and I redid the bearings on both my front and rear wheels, and it should have been a 1 hour job. It ended up being about a 5 hour job. And that was a lot to do with my ineptitude, but also faffing around with a rather complex bearing press tube.
This socket sets as bearing presses and random tools from your garage.
Were you there looking? I literally, there was a point where I'll use an oversized socket to hold something while I press the rest of the thing then.
These ratchet rings here, you can roll 20 ratchet rings in a ratchet ring press at a time. But when you do that, you have a very poor... when you look at this in a magnifying glass at the teeth, a very poor, what would you call it, match between the two ratchets. But look at that, you literally can't see where that joins. So they only roll 2 of these at a time. So almost all factories that make these, besides DT Swiss do this in-house. All the other factories that do these DT Swiss style ratchet systems now buy them off the main producer. This factory where I work with, they bought their own machine. They roll 2 at a time, and have a look at it. It is just beautiful.
It's a work
They
of
heat
art.
treat them as well after. They've all got laser etched serial numbers on them, so they know exactly which batch came out. So these, man, we've done...
This is incredible.
You literally sit them in a machine and you put about 400 Newton meters of torque through these, and they repeat that hundreds of thousands of times. The other ratchets that we're getting from the main production factory, they'll shit out after 20,000 revolutions. These will go over 100,000 or more. So anyway, random bits and pieces.
Isn't it just?
This is my favourite reaming tool, if anyone's been
Well, I've been
go.
reamed quite a few times,
I feel like that wouldn't hurt.
mostly
too
at
much.
Moz.
Nipple alignment in a wheel is the biggest cause of spoke failure. So if you get a nipple come up out of the rim and it doesn't line up with the spoke towards the flange angle, and say the nipple comes up straight and the spoke bends, it bends on final thread, which is a stress raiser. And that's why you get 90% of spoke breakages happen down near the spoke end where the rim is, and then the nipple falls in the rim and you're like, oh, I broke a spoke, or what's going on? It's because the internal part of the rim isn't seated in the angle that needs to be seated, e.g. the carbon's moved or something, or the drill hole wasn't offset drilled and you got center drilled rims, which are crap. But if you don't have center drilled rims, which they should never be, then it's usually an internal resin fold or something going on. This tool just goes in the rim, right angle drill bit on the inside, and I spin that. You can feel it. It's like diamond burr sanding material.
Oh.
And then inside
yeah.
the rim, if that was a rim with a hole, it would sit in there. And then you reseat the nipple hole perfectly, so then there's no stress on the... So as you're building, every second or third wheel, you'll have a nipple you'll come across, you go, oh, that's not sitting right, and then you just reseat it.
Yes.
But, you know, you'd rather that than have a spoke break in a few years' time.
Absolutely. I've broken a few spokes in my life and it bloody sucks.
Yeah. So if you can avoid those things, that's a hidden nipple, just so you know what they look like.
Okay.
So it's a tiny little hidden nipple.
So a hidden nipple, how does that sit in the rim?
So you never want to do internal nipples with a tiny hole because they are the worst for spoke breakage. So what that does, an internal nipple doesn't allow any alignment between the nipple and the spoke line to the flange. So you always end up with a couple of bent ones, maybe half a dozen or more, that fail on final thread. Whereas that is an external nipple hole, e.g. like a normal rim with a bigger hole, and it goes through, but it doesn't have an external piece. It stops, that's where the rim, there we are, where the rim would stop right there.
Okay.
And then you have to true them internally through the back. But this, because it's got a bigger hole, it allows alignment. I could easily run internal nipples and save a heap of hassle, but you'd break nipples and the poor bastard that bought it in 2 years' time would not be very happy with you. So that's actually how Scope do it as well. So Scope are doing the right thing. They should. It's $7,000 for a pair of wheels.
Yeah, it's a lot
but
of
they
cash.
are a very good set of wheels, those Scope.
Yeah.
I'll give them mass credit. I hope to beat them like any good competitor. If not, be very close to them. But yeah, they're a well-built wheel.
And then what's this we got here?
That's a cut-up reserve wheel.
Okay.
They're a good wheel as well.
Yeah.
They do come with a base level hub at like the 3,000. At the moment you put a good hub in them, they go up a lot in price. So, you know, my wheels comparably to them, it's roughly half the price for the level of hub that you've got there.
That's an impressive hub.
And I'm as wide as them. The reason I like those wheels so much, they were one of the first to be really nice and wide. And yeah, they're nipple patched. They're a very good wheel. So that's obviously Cervelo's brand, which is actually made by Santa Cruz. So they're the mountain bike. The reason they're good is because they're of a mountain bike ilk.
Yeah.
And mountain bikers do things a lot better than roadies do them on average.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, like Cervelo have really led a lot of bike innovation. So when Reserve came out with the big super wide wheels or super wide aero profiles, I mean, like it wasn't that much of a surprise to see Cervelo move down that way.
Yeah, they've been aero, like in triathlon, they've been around for a long time, obviously, and road aero as well. And finally, you can actually fit wheels in their goddamn bikes.
Yeah.
Thank God. Someone got the memo 20 years later.
That's right. I remember like one time back when I had my first gen Venge, and I was testing it against the S5 as it was at the time, which was super narrow, super skinny, and yeah, you could barely get tires in it. With the clearances were so tight.
Oh, now carbon spoke. So I forgot to. I want to show you a carbon spoke before it's fully assembled. I was going to find which one is. I should have left it out there.
For those at home, we're looking at about, what do you reckon, 18, 20 spokes in front of us?
Thereabouts.
Are they all different, Ben?
Yeah, they're all different. Oh, here we go.
Oh,
Here's one that's not assembled yet, just so you can see how the hell a carbon spoke stays together.
Yep.
So can you see how these ones, for example, here we go, are stuck on the end there?
Yep.
And then you can pull the hell out of that, you know, put 200 kgf through it and it's not going to rip the end of this off. Unlike these ones here, which do rip the end off, which I've bought those, which are the most worst carbon spoke known to man.
So
Anyway.
just for the listeners, this is the flange end coming in.
That's the nipple end.
This is the nipple end, and then because you got the cap here. So
Yeah.
so the cap pulling out from where the hub is versus where the interface with the wheel is.
Correct. So that area there has effectively, these come out of a machine like a big carbon loom, like spaghetti, and it just spits out like huge amounts of spaghetti. It's bladed and then it's forged, or not forged, it's pressed round. But they come out, then they cut them, and then they mold this little. Can you feel the end there? That little bit of S-glass, fiberglass on the end of them.
Oh,
Just
yes.
feel it. You can feel it's a bit raised.
Yep.
This has already been, this nipple end here, which is down the rim end where you obviously do the wheel up, has been put on already. Then they mold this under heat load, and then they yank this on at about 300 kgf, and it clicks into place. And then that will tell if it'll fail, if it's going to fail, which they never fail anymore on that point, which they used to fail all the time.
Yep.
And that's how you do it. Now that's patented. That system there is patented by Stren, and they're the best at carbon spokes. That's where I get my carbon spokes from. I waited 7 years before I built carbon spoke wheels because these used to fail, and they used to have aluminium nipples that corroded because aluminium and carbon sit on the opposite end of the periodic table, and they goddamn hate each other.
Yes.
They detest each other. So these are now Sandvik stainless steel. And yeah, that's why now carbon spokes are acceptable to use. It wasn't the spoke that was failing en masse.
It was actually the
nipple.
interface point, yeah.
Yeah, it was the nipple that was failing. They still do fail if you hit them with an axial loading, like a big stick goes in your wheel or something, but they're pretty damn strong these days, which is not bad.
So are all your wheels built with carbon spokes now?
No, definitely
No.
not. You can break that one if you like.
I feel a bit worried about this. This is like when
Have that one. You'd be
the-
amazed
the-
how
the
far they
lovely
go before
Mrs.
they
Irish
break.
Johnny comes and says, "Hey, can you open this jar?" And I'm like, "This is a test of my manhood. I don't feel comfortable about it." Oh wow!
Oh yeah, there we go.
Oh, that feels good. This is like popping bubble wrap, destroying carbon. Oh, that's good.
Isn't it funny though?
Oh wow, that one's easy to snap. These are the bad ones, just so you know.
Yeah.
These are from a different factory.
There's
Snap one of these. How much easier this snaps?
No,
Well, it's not snapping on him.
One of the nice things about carbon is its unidirectional layout that it can bend in one way and bend the other. So I was just trying to.
Oh no,
like
it's
an
all
Egypt
0
tri-
degree.
Yeah.
That's all 0, straight down the guts. Yeah, you just got to bend it.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, jeez Louise.
Shit. That was almost in the
So
eyeball.
a part of the spoke bit has literally just flown off, never to be seen again, probably with someone's AirPods somewhere, and it snapped
so I
up.
stand on it.
And that was nearly Seano's eye as well.
Yeah, those
Splendid.
things, I feel for that company. I like that company. They're nice guys, but my God, they've had a big failure there. And
I think
they're resolving
we'll have
it.
We'll have to put a little photo up of the
Yeah.
two snapped spokes side by side, because one of the snaps, as we know, carbon is lots and lots of strands, and in one of it, those strands have started to break apart before the spoke
Yes.
fail. It's a bit like you can imagine a laminated window when you hit it and it cracks and all the cracks go everywhere, but it doesn't shatter. Whereas the one I've just broken that nearly took out poor old Seano's eye has snapped really quite badly in half and like quite suddenly, and there's a couple of sharp edges around it. That's so interesting to think like not all carbon is the same. And I mean, like, it's a bit of a trope in cycling. We know it, but we're so used to just looking at it from the outside in.
Yeah.
To get these insights into manufacturing and manufacturing choices makes such a I hope it's interesting for everyone else. I mean, like, I'm fascinated.
Yeah, some of the factories, especially the head engineers, they are amazing guys. Like, they really go through hell with developing these type of products. Like, this has been a 10-year cycle
Yeah.
to develop that spoke. I mean, that's these guys are making car wheels as well out of carbon, and they really haven't sold any yet. But they've been doing that for at least 10 years as well. So yeah, when you look at risk reward ratio, I'm really impressed with the amount of risk they're willing to take, and yeah, lucky to be able to work with them because they're doing a pretty awesome job. Not always, but that's my job.
That's the risk reward, though.
To
Yeah.
filter through it. Like I saltwater electrolysis bathed the original carbon spokes, and they just turned to dust within 2 weeks in the bath. Whereas these ones I electrolysis tested. I knew it wouldn't have a problem, but I still did it anyway. And nothing. It's just sat in there for like 2 months and no issues. So
That's incredible.
you do have to check things. Yeah.
And I suppose particularly if you think about the Australian conditions as well, and certainly up here in the hotter summers, doing things where you can accelerate your longevity testing to try and see how long is a product going to work for? Is it going to be 5 years, 6 years? You have to do it, and there's different methods. Like, so what brought you to doing electrolysis testing?
Oh, a mate who works in the army. So he works in the aviation department, and I've known him for years. And I'm like, how do you test stuff? And he's like, we just chuck it in a bath and chuck some electrodes in there. And I was like, can you do that with my stuff? He's like, yeah, no worries.
Jack it in, mate. Fill your boots.
Oh yeah, exactly. Get it up, yeah. But yeah, as I said before, aluminium and carbon. So in the aerospace industry, it is banned literally to bond aluminium and carbon together, even with a fiberglass scrim. So a fiberglass scrim provides a barrier layer between the aluminium and the carbon, but the electrode effect or whatever it is that happens between the two still makes its way through the fiberglass, and they'll just get a galvanic corrosion set up. And once it starts in one spot, it just moves
can't
along
stop
and you're gone. Hence the old Cadex bikes were a carbon tube laminated to aluminium.
That's right.
And they just have a nice after 5 years just make a break.
Oh, GT used to have this incredible mountain bike as well. The LST1. I'm butchering that name now, but yes, it was carbon fiber tubes, and it had aluminium lugs, and it looked amazing, and it was amazing
for 4 years
until very suddenly it was not amazing anymore. It was the opposite of amazing and falling apart.
Isn't it funny though, because you mentioned before, like back years ago when you were building wheels in the bottom of France, that the transition you saw was aluminium wheels, then to the aluminium carbon sort of blend, then to carbon. And you're saying that they just don't mend well. Who would have thought that? Like, whose great idea was it to even put carbon and aluminium together?
They're two awesome materials.
Yeah.
Now, when you bond a rim to when you bond a carbon hoop to an aluminium main, or what do you call it, the body section of the wheel, they do it in a way, they definitely do that with a fiberglass scrim, but it's sort of holding itself in a valley. So it's not like it's being pulled apart. The only company I've ever seen bond carbon to aluminium en masse successfully was Shimano with their RS80s, or what were they called?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Shimano somehow did it. And I was like, how the hell have they done this? I cut heaps of them up and I chucked them in the bath with the electrodes and they handled it. So somehow Shimano worked it out. But, you know, the aerospace industry still ban it to this day. I have seen some Shimano wheels delaminate. So maybe the operator had a bad day or something.
Yeah, well, I was going to say I've seen Shimano cranks to laminate too. So
I do not want to. I think Shimano. I love
a terrific company.
I love that.
I'm a Shimano fanboy.
Like, that small little error, and it's funny because everyone, you know, why are mechanics so angry these days? I think you guys brought this up recently, and it's good to see that you guys have a much more balanced approach to, you know, realistic topics that aren't always. No one's perfect. Like, everyone makes mistakes. But Shimano have provided the best cost per product of any company in the bike industry, I believe, ever. To be able to buy a group set off them at that level, at that price, is amazing. And they've had a few small errors that they've resolved really well. But the amount they've made for the smaller errors that they've had is testament to the Japanese. This tool here is actually made by Japan. It's one of the few things I don't get made in China. I tried to make this in China and they kept stuffing it up. And then I went to Japan to a dental company to make that, and they were awesome to deal with. But that cost a lot of money.
Did it really?
I can
a
imagine.
lot of money.
But that is a precision tool.
Yeah. I got
Who
10
would
of
have
them, and it was
thought?
about $2,000.
You're joking.
Little things. Yeah. US.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, dental medical company.
Wow.
I would not have thought
But that has saved, that one tool probably lasts, I don't know, a year. So 10 of them, that'd be, no, less than a year because I've already gone through a few of them, maybe half. But it's probably saved 30, 40, 50 spoke breakages.
Yep.
And that's worth it.
And that's worth it because that's the long term, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's the reliability
Nothing sucks
factor,
more
yeah.
than a spoke break.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish the Japanese made stuff a bit more affordable because they're pretty cool. Actually, Shimano does. There's nothing else really on the table here that I've got that's awesome. Maybe something else in the bag here.
Oh, there's
Just more
a
bits of
bag
broken
of tricks
carbon.
here on the table. Yeah.
Oh,
Gee.
one last thing, I will show you this. This is
Ooh.
interesting. This is a filament wound clincher hook to give you a gauge of formation of a wheel before it comes out. This is the older way of doing it, but it is very interesting. So this nylon mandrel hoop here gets put in a machine where they wrap pre-preg carbon tow around it. The company that made this was a textile company, and they were amazing for all their weaving and textile production, so they moved to carbon. And they had this, which is actually an awesome system, but it's very expensive and labour intensive and to make. So there's new ways of making these now that isn't as hard. So effectively you have to cut this out with a diamond cutter, and then remove that carbon and the hoop out of it, and then you have the clincher shape left in there. That's pretty cool to see how it comes out of the mould. And see how it's poo brown? That's like
why is that?
Really high. It's burning the resin. That's 330 degree cured high temp resin. That's what I was talking about, where they had the mops or the squeegees cooking up the resin, and they wouldn't let me look at it.
Yeah, so for the listeners
IP.
who don't get to see it in all its glory, like from a distance it looks pretty black, but under the light you can see it's really quite brown, like a goldish fade brown.
Yeah, that's the resin burning. It just smells
brown,
like it's
whichever you
burning
want.
during the curing process. But you need to cure resin 10% above the TG that you're looking to create. So if you're looking to create a 300 degree TG, glass transition point, e.g. where the resin is going to melt and you're going to blow your wheel apart, then you need to cure it at 330 degrees. So that's why they're cured at 330, is because they're aiming for a 300 degree TG. So then when you're braking down the back of the backside, then you're not going to melt your rim brake. Not that we use rim brake anymore.
Now, this item you've got here has 2017 Caden. So was this sort of the manufacturing process back in 2017 for?
Yeah, that was up until very recently, actually. Yeah,
and then
that still would be awesome. They've just found a less expensive way to do it to create the same
like
effect.
what is that method?
So they use a preformer now, which is a plastic preformer instead of this. And we talked about it before. So you've got your broken wheel over here.
Yes.
And you can see.
Oh, and this wheel is broken. It is literally snapped in half.
That perfect line of delamination there?
Yes.
Yeah, that is not good. That resolves that issue.
Yes.
Because it provides a even toe of carbon or strand of carbon around the corner of the clincher hook. Because the most weak area of the wheel is obviously where it gets the most impact, which is the hook area on the outside of the rim. And this is a prime example of a company that does not, and this is a big company, this is very expensive wheels we're looking at here. This does not have a wound hook or any of the fiber progressing around into the valley of the carbon, and it has just totally delaminated.
Yeah.
Like you can look all around this, and this area just sheared off, because all you're looking at here is a bond between two different layers of carbon. Whereas now with these, instead of having to wind it over here under load and then forge it and cure it and then
cut it out at the top,
they worked out how to wrap it into it and put a plastic preformer in there.
Yeah.
So that also stops any of these areas, like this wheel. Oh, this has the tape on it. You can't see it. You can just see one here. We have dirty bits like this and mold butt form lines. So when you have a mold butt form wheel like that one over there is, which is a good $4,000 set of wheels, you have four corners that come in to form that complex shape by just pushing in on it, and then you're relying on the bladder pressure to push against that to form a very complex shape. Whereas that complex shape has been formed and wrapped and filament wound before the molding even takes place. You look at if you sand this and look at it in the sunlight, all those fibers beautifully go around the edge in an even fashion. This one, I guarantee you, they all go up vertically to the end. And if you hit a block of wood on the end of the grain with an axe, what does it do? Split straight down. If you hit a block of wood on the side of the grain, what does it do? Nothing.
Yeah.
It's very hard to break it. So when you hit carbon, like a UCI test, a standard impact test, you hit the carbon on the edge of the grain, you can hit this thing 30 times and it won't fail. If you hit a mold butt form wheel, you might get 4 or 5 or 6 hits out of it and it'll fail. So carbon, like wood, doesn't like being hit on an open grain.
That's so cool.
It is, hey.
But they found a cheap way to do it, and I can now get more wheels, because back then I had so many problems getting wheels made, because these take 2 to 3 times as long to make. So I'd run out of wheels all the time.
One process to another process to do the moulding, then the cutting, then the finishing.
Yeah, and the new process is actually even stronger than that process.
Wow.
Yeah, which is cool. So the two brothers that run this company, man, hats off to those dudes. They deserve their Maybach.
That is solid, hey.
That's incredible.
Like it is a solid structure. That.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly internal. Look at that. Look at that
Yeah.
old bladder though.
Yep.
That's got an old bladder system. Now it's not bad, but the new bladder systems. I forgot to bring that up. The reason I've been able to get so light now is pre-shaped latex bladders. So each wheel, a tri-spoke, TT disc, 45, 60, whatever shape it is, has its own specific shaped bladder. So you get a very even compression load internally during the curing process, and you can pump the bladders a lot higher. Like we're talking close to 200 psi, where it used to be 100 psi, and you don't get this bridging and voiding and folding feel in there of the bladder.
And that's weight. All that's weight.
That's resin.
Yeah.
So
like,
we're using the same amount of carbon, but we're getting a much lower resin percentage. Before you had to keep 30, 35 resin percentage. Now you're getting down to probably 20%, 25% resin. So you don't lose any carbon strength at all, and you just squeeze out the resin evenly. And it looks like a baby's butt in there now as well, which is nice.
Yeah, this would be a real good picture now for the listeners at home, because as we've seen carbon progress, not just the bikes, but in the wheels, and every couple of years we hear, it's lighter, it's faster. Well, how can it possibly be lighter? And I think, what we've heard tonight and today is around some of the manufacturing process. And when you look on the inside, it's unreal. Like one side looks like someone's put butter all through it, and there's big layers of it. And then this next one that I have in front of me, it's as smooth. It's almost like glass on the inside as it is on the outside.
So how many years is that? That's 8 years?
Yeah.
And that's only 8 years of...
So I've been in this factory for 12 years, roughly. Yeah, and the production level just keeps getting...
Yeah, that is incredible.
Disc brake now, you only cure at about 160 degrees because you don't need the TG to be as high for the rim braking. So you can cure at a lot lower temperature, which means you can provide a higher internal cavity pressure without having to worry about the heat affecting the bladder system. Because they used to fail around the nipple, the valve hole, because that's where the valve, the bladder comes out as well, as right on the valve hole.
Really?
Yeah, and so you get this tiny hole squeezing a huge amount of air in under high heat loads, and it can hang a little bit. So yeah,
it's so cool. And I know I've said it a few times now, but this intrinsic system, the bike, the environment, the rider, it's all one piece, all interacting. Like when we were in the deep polemic of rim brakes versus disc brakes, and we were so focused on the braking and the application of force either to the forks, offset to the forks, what it would do to the hubs. I don't think anyone was ever imagined, but I wonder how it might transform how we will manufacture the wheels, and particularly the hubs. And I think that's been really interesting to see from a manufacturing point of view, the leaps that have been able to take forward when you take out that component, that heat load, that braking.
These are horrible to make. Rim brake is so hard to make. I'm lucky they still make them for me. And I have to beg them to make them for me.
Yeah.
So they have 6 banks of 18 ovens in this factory. It's enormous. Like when you go in there, we're talking a pile of molds to as high as maybe 2 meters high. I'm not exaggerating. A pile, and we got 6 of them running through the molding room on one bank of ovens, rotating through. Whereas when they do a rim brake curing run, you have to turn those ovens off 180 degrees and put them up to 330. And then they've got to run less molds through there because there's not as many people making rim brake anymore. Yes. So they're not getting as much efficiency out of it, and they take a lot longer to make. And it's hot and filthy in there. It's already hot in there, man. It's
300 degrees.
I hung out there. I'm not shitting you.
Goodness.
I've hung out in the curing room, especially back in the day when we were doing a lot, in my boxes. And they don't mind. No steel cap toes, no nothing. I love the risk-reward ratio over there. Like, you need a bit of risk to produce. And they don't even look at me twice in my boxer shorts. They're wearing jeans and they're fine in there, and it's 50 degrees. So
that is mental.
I don't miss rim brake curing. I love them. I love rim brake bikes. They're very simple, but yeah, I can only get so many. So I'm one of the few. I know there's only a couple of guys that still make high temp rim brake there, and none of the other big factories are doing it. Zip's not doing it anymore.
I was going to say
a lot of people
that
have moved away from it.
There wouldn't be
so
many.
You can't get high temp rim brake really. I've looked everywhere unless you're at this factory. And there's only me and a couple of guys.
Yeah, like they're like I didn't even know rim brake wheels were still getting built. That's
a lot of rim brake bikes out there.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there
Especially
are.
in triathlon, I sell a heap of deep dish rim brake
true. Like the
wheels.
The giant Trinities.
They're beautiful bikes.
That's right. That's a good bike.
Yeah, great bike. But I think we should probably wrap it up, Ben. It's been a great chat, mate.
Cheers, boys. I hope I didn't dump too much
No.
detail.
Well, I've loved it. I mean,
I've certainly
going down
loved
these tech rabbit holes is so interesting. I think, when we started the episode, with your work with the Australian track team, so like the forefront of innovation. I think you've taken us on a journey of back to how it started, how the different systems of manufacturing, aero testing, tire and rim interface, and then some of this fun breaking spokes and nearly breaking poor Shoney's eye. It's been terrific, and for you making time for us, this afternoon has been great. And I feel like I could go down so many other rabbit holes. There's so much more to talk about, but this has been terrific. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome, boys. Been great to chat.
All right, crew. We'll see you next week, eh?
See you next time.
Yes.
500 watts, please.